Good morning. It's Saturday. This is the Cloak and Dagger Weekly Briefing. We've got Albert Marko and myself, Tony Nash. We have, I don't know, some interesting stuff to talk about around, let's see. Oh, Big Beautiful Bill, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about the Big Beautiful Bill, and this is Trump's big domestic landmark legislation this week. And we are also talking about the tariffs, of course, and what's happening around tariffs. And I think Albert's perspective on tariffs is really interesting because it's kind of the market acceptance and the market uncertainty and the volatility and stuff. So we'll talk through that. We're also going to talk about Germany. I think Germany is a country that is really kind of trying to re-find itself at this point and figure out what
Mhm.
it is. And so we're going to spend a little time talking about Germany, which is great. So, Albert, good morning.
Great.
It's Saturday. You've had your coffee. I've had part of a coffee. And by the way, we're in my office right now. So, what you're seeing behind me is a rig for my son Samuel to film his auditions.
Oh, nice.
So he's auditioning for some Disney role right now. So you can see our light stacked on top of a bunch of books, which is awesome. And then we've also got this is the Nerd Roaster Packing Center. So, we're shipping some coffee out here, not packing, but shipping some coffee out here. So this is very much a work
Nice.
office. So anyway, okay. So I want to talk about the big beautiful bill. Um, so we did some analysis on the big beautiful bill earlier this week on Cloak and Dagger, and we made that public because we thought it was pretty important. And so part of what really captured my attention on the big beautiful bill, I don't really think it's beautiful, but uh, was the estimates on how much it's going to cost, right? And so I'm a nerd and I like to look into the numbers around things. And there were estimates from some think tanks and banks saying it was going to cost $5 trillion, 5.4, I think, trillion dollars on this. Now, what we all need to understand is whenever this type of analysis is done, it's done from a discipline called economic impact studies. This is getting really boring really quickly, but they use things like called economic multipliers, which are you say you're going to spend X dollars, it's going to add Y multiplier into the economy. You're going to spend X dollars, it's going to add Z multiplier onto the cost of the bill. And what we found was the banks and the think tanks were using multipliers that would really, they were half of the normal multiplier for revenue generation and two times the normal multiplier for cost generation. So they were saying it was going to cost a lot more than it really would. We found it was 1.82 trillion that it would likely um, uh, cost the economy over 10 years. So that's, 182 billion a year, which is just in terms of the magnitude of US budget, it's completely doable. So, uh, so when you see analysis of legislation, you always have to, the first thing you should do, the easiest thing to do, go into Grok or go into some LLM and say XYZ Bank did some analysis on this. What are the multipliers they're using? And it'll tell you. And then say, what are the academically accepted multipliers for this? And it should know this stuff. And so, kind of cut through the nonsense of advocacy because any sort of economic impact study or tax impact study, there is no tax center out there, tax think tank that is biased. There's maybe one, I think, I used to work for them, that's mostly unbiased, but kind of leans right. But none of this is right down the middle, unbiased. So always, always, always check the numbers. Don't take these things at face value. So, Albert, now that I've nerded out and completely bored everybody on the numbers behind the big, beautiful bill, what are your thoughts?
I hate it. I hate the bill. I hate the bill. It's a roadmap to kleptocracy. I don't like it. I think it's way over the top. It's adding to the deficits. It goes against a lot of the campaign promises that they came up with, right? And a lot of the offsetting costs that they're going to try to attempt is based on Trump's tariff revenue, which I think is complete horseshit to begin with. Listen, I know this thing passed by a slim majority in the House. It's not going to pass the Senate as it is. So the Senate's going to knock it around a few
Of
times.
course, yeah,
Yeah, back
always.
to the House, and the House will go back to the Senate. This thing, if it gets whatever final version it is, if it gets passed, it'll be hopefully before the August recess, the congressional August recess, right? That's what I was told. That's what they're aiming for. That's what they're projecting for it to pass. I don't think it will, to
Okay.
be quite honest with you.
So what
I,
is the biggest, if you had to pull out kind of a single biggest issue, like specific bill issue, what's the issue that you have?
it's not so much the specific bill issue. It's just I don't like the estimates of how they're using Trump tariff revenue to offset the final cost of this thing, because I know that's coming. I had these discussions, right? I just don't like that methodology. It's kind of a gray area because it's never really, that's not, you're not supposed to do that, to be quite honest.
Well, it hasn't been a major revenue driver since like the 20s or the early 30s.
Yeah,
So it's not uncharted territory, but it's been a while.
yeah, and this whole yo-yo of like back and forth on the markets of, like, Trump talking about the EU 50% tariffs, markets getting, plunging, and then fine, towards the end of the day nobody believed them anymore. They'll think he'll cave, like he caved against China, and the markets rally back. It's just,
Okay,
it's
hold
just
on. Let's go back to the big beautiful bill for a second. I know you want to jump to tariffs and markets, but
no,
let's
no,
go
no,
back
no.
to
But this is all
so
part of it. This is all part of it,
I
Tony. Because
understand. I understand, but let's go back to the Senate. So, what will happen, and who are the key players in the Senate to get this through? And what are their pet issues?
Well, first of all, the biggest obstacle is Mitch McConnell and his merry crew of anti-Trumpers, right? And they don't like Trump. They never did, never will, right? They're not going to rubber stamp anything unless they get something substantial out of it.
Here's a serious question, though.
Okay.
Is Mitch McConnell cognitively capable of doing the job that's an honest question because he's like 130 years old. So is
It's
he
it's
cognitively capable of doing his job or are staffers doing his job?
No, I mean he's able to certainly direct, you know, or navigate policy for these type of bills.
I've seen
However,
the guy stroke out like 3 times in front of camera.
I understand that, but he still has his wits about him, and he can talk to Thune and some other guys to actually enact and be a little bit more proactive against Trump in that respect. But back to it, it always goes back to Mitch McConnell. I mean, he's the ringleader for the GOP in the Senate, right? I mean, look what he did to poor Rick Scott. I love Rick Scott, and I thought that he should have been the Senate leader, but when he challenged Mitch, he got obliterated and
Yeah.
eviscerated, and that's just the way PG, that's the way Senate politics works,
Big time
unfortunately.
politics. Yep.
Yeah, it's just the way it works. So, but back to the BBB, um, in the Senate, it's just it's too much debt for the Senate to swallow. I don't really think that it has any possibility of passing as is. Um, we'll see. We'll see what they demand. We'll see what the SALT deductions come out with for the Democrats, and what.
It's up to like 40 grand now or something.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know what the final number will be, or what the GOP has to give the Democrats to get at least like a couple votes to offset whatever Republicans are opposing this thing. And I think like 4 or 5 Republicans are going to oppose it as it is. So, again, no shot
Well,
for the.
Murkowski is going to oppose it,
Yeah, of course.
and that lady from Maine is going to oppose it. Which
Yeah.
so we can count on those two opposing it no matter what. So okay. Um, Now, what is there anything that you like about the bill?
You know, trying to support the middle class and lower 50%. I do like that, right? That they need help. I just hope that they expand it into or morph it into supporting small businesses and medium-sized businesses. I think that the whole SBA loan from COVID stuff that needs to get addressed. I mean, those companies are getting rocked
You know,
by
I
the
have one of those that's suffering because we
yeah,
don't have
but
our.
I don't understand. It's an easy fix. It's an easy win, and not one person in Congress is talking about it. Every time I bring it up to congressional staffers, they're like, "Oh, that's a brilliant idea." Oh, well, if it's a fucking brilliant idea,
Right.
put in the damn bill. It's not that
Yeah.
hard. At least talk about it.
Yeah, the
You know?
major issue is this, and this is a holdover, is there are these employment retention tax credits from 2021 that
Mm-hmm.
haven't been paid out. And we've had IRS workers sitting at home for the last 4 years. They're just back to work this past month. And so now they're sorting through 4 years of employer retention tax credit information to pay out to small businesses that have been eking it out for the past 4 years. It's
Mm-hmm.
crazy, right? So,
The other thing that this bill does address is it addresses the rural vote and the farmers and the agriculture industry and overall. And the Republicans absolutely need to get those votes because they're key for winning Senate majority.
yep.
And the farm bill that hasn't been passed in like years is absolutely shocking to me, to be quite honest with you. Absolutely shocking of
Shocking
just
that
because
it has not passed.
there's no farm bill. Usually, farm bills get passed, just prior to presidential elections because it's such a key component for the electorate,
Mhm.
and it's absolutely disgusting of what the Senate and the House have done to just ignore farmers and agriculture rural voters for the past like 3 years. It's just appalling to me. It's really disrespectful, and I've had heated arguments about it, but now they're trying because now they see that the midterms is going to be close as Trump is losing a lot of support and the GOP is taking a couple of hits because of his antics.
So, okay, I want to get back to the farm bill, but you say that Trump is losing support, and
Oh,
you've
he
said
is.
that several times. I don't see it. Okay, the people I talk to, I know I'm in Texas.
You're
Okay,
in Houston, Texas.
that's right. But
Yeah.
Houston is a very blue city, and I just don't see it. I just wonder, okay, for people watching, are you seeing it? Like, are you seeing that Trump is losing support? Because that's an honest, serious question I have. And Albert, I know you have some anecdotal evidence. I have some anecdotal evidence. I would love to see what our viewers see.
Yeah, just jump in the comments and let us know what your thoughts are. I mean, for me, from what I've seen, from who I've talked to, the support is dwindling just because of a lot of the chaotic market moves and political moves lately. So it's just it's not just me. It's even like a lot of the Republican staffers, right, are quite concerned about how this is affecting the market, specifically the markets and pensions and whatnot, of how it's affecting their electorate for the coming year.
Okay. So back to ag, I watch maybe one or two press conferences from the Oval Office each week just because there's so much coming out. And I was watching one of them this week, and Trump was talking about part of the tariff stuff, and this is kind of our segue into the tariff section of it. Um, and he was talking about how other countries rip off our farmers and they rip off other people, but he kept coming back to our farmers. And so I think there is vocal support from the Oval Office for agriculture. Vocal support, I'll say. And I haven't really watched much about what the Secretary of Agriculture has done. Um, but are you seeing much executive action to support agriculture to help where maybe the legislative action isn't coming?
No, because they don't care. No one in the Trump administration cares, right? They don't care. He's not going to be up. He's not up for reelection. He doesn't care, right? This is really a Senate GOP issue at the moment, of like how to support farmers and whatnot. I mean, it's just criminal. Their inputs are rising. Tariffs are putting an unnecessary burden on both imports and exports. It's just they're getting put through the ringer, and there's next to no support right now in Washington. That should be addressed, and it will be most likely for the midterms. But like I said, it's a little bit too late in my opinion.
So when you say farmers are suffering from tariffs, you're talking about, for example, like poultry exports or beef exports going to, say, China or Europe or something. Well, they can't go to Europe because they don't take our stuff, but say to China or to other places, you're talking about soy exports to China, a lot of these things that are held up because of the trade negotiations,
And
right?
the inputs, like if you're buying a tractor wheels, tires and brakes components and whatever, name your random component, where does it come from? Not very many companies make stuff in the United States in that respect. I mean, I know Titan Tire makes a lot of the tires, a lot of the brake components and stuff like that, but aside from them, I can't really, who's making this stuff, who's making the small things that the
You know what
farmers.
I've noticed living in Texas? So there's an Indian company called Mahindra
Mhm.
that really didn't do much in the US until probably 10 or 15 years ago. They are all over US ag markets selling agriculture equipment, selling tractors and small vehicles and that sort of thing. It's so interesting for me to see the Indian farm equipment and how well it's doing in the US. So I do think, in terms of trade negotiations, the US-India trade negotiation, farm equipment is not a small issue in that negotiation.
No, it's not. It should be one of the primary, objectives of the administration is how to deal with the agriculture and fertilizer, machinery, so on.
Right. Okay, so in terms of the tariffs, so we saw the EU came to talk this week, I think, and they came with a plan, which I think both you and I talked about this the day before the event, the meeting. Europe's not going to budge on anything because they don't feel any sense of urgency, right? So
Yeah,
they knew
they're
their
like,
first offer would not really include anything.
yeah. I mean, the Europeans are like, frogs boiling, lobsters boiling. They don't really know they're in hot water until they start dying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just the way the Europeans are. I don't know what's wrong with them. No foresight, no. There's risk averse, and
I know what's wrong with them. There have been no consequences their entire life.
yeah,
So they don't feel any sense of urgency because they had never have consequences to their decisions because we're there to bail them out.
yep,
Whether it's swap lines or whether it's defense or whatever it is, we're there to, we save Deutsche Bank, they save Deutsche Bank, but we save Deutsche Bank and, you name a bank and we've helped save it. The ECB gets all the glory, but we provide the dollars to keep them solvent so that their healthcare
yep,
system doesn't fall over, this sort of thing. So Europe has never felt consequences, at least in the lifespan of baby boomers. They've never felt consequences for
no,
anything.
oh, no, yeah,
So why are they stalling? Because they don't really understand what consequences are. And especially European bureaucrats. They don't understand consequences at all. I'm not saying your average working European doesn't understand consequences. I'm talking about the politicians who don't understand consequences.
no. Why would they understand consequences? Whatever election results happen, they just dismiss them and make some coalition that kind of gets 50%,
Right.
or at least like stops the opposition from gaining parliamentary power. So, well, they don't care.
Right. So do you think there will be material progress on US EU discussions, let's say before the end of July? Because we all know they're out in August. So will there be any material progress before the end of July?
No, I mean now the Europeans are starting to go on vacation.
Yeah.
Realistically, they're half of them are in the office and they're not in any kind of negotiation or talk mode. They have no elections, impending elections to deal with. So what do they care? They're not gonna.
I mean, they already just fixed the Romanian election, right? So
Yeah,
job's
exactly.
done.
They do that all. I know they always do that sort of stuff. I mean, hats off to you guys for
Yeah,
manipulating.
nice job.
Nice job.
Democracy, European
I
style,
wish
right?
I could do the same, but
Yeah,
but yeah, they got their job done. They can hold off until September 1st when they
right.
come to the office.
Wait till there's some new election to fix. But yeah, they'll take a break for the summer. Okay. Then when we look at, you know, Bessent was on Friday. He was out on different news. feeds talking about trade negotiations and debt and other stuff. So, talk to me about your thoughts on Bessent because I'm pretty sure you're not going to be shy about it.
I don't like the guy. Never did like the guy. I think he's a liar to the bond market. He lies, flat out lies to the bond market people.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. Tell me that Yellen didn't lie to the bond market.
Well, yeah, she did, but we all knew that she was a disastrous, witch bureaucrat that
Right.
served Biden for that's it. He didn't care about America. He just cared to serve Democrats. Bessent came in there as like Trump's MAGA guy and blah blah blah. Okay, the guy worked for Soros, right? Right. He's an LGBTQ supporter, gay. I don't care. Date man, woman, animals, whatever. I don't care. But I mean, realistically, like, where do you think? How does he fall in the conservative spectrum in any respect? Right. For
Well, I mean, just let me give that a little bit of a serious answer. I think that Trump has redefined Republican as not a conservative, meaning a socially conservative party. Okay. So I think the LGBT community is welcome in the Republican Party. I think all that stuff is fine. I think
yeah,
Trump has been trying to move Republicans away from being socially conservative. He's appointed Hindus and Sikhs to very high profile positions in the administration. So I think he's moved it away from that socially conservative and even fiscally conservative. I think he's just tried to move it right of center rather than extreme right of center, which I think is very interesting because he's more of a Ford type of Republican and even a Reagan type of Republican than what we've gotten over the past, say, since Bush Jr., which is kind of a poser, conservative, war-loving Republican. Does that
yeah,
make sense?
I know you make sense, and that's correct, right? But the fact of the matter is, people don't change over the years. I've come to find out, right? They can mask who they are, but they don't really change. And Bessent was never a conservative in neither fiscally, neither politically, nothing.
I mean, but Trump was a Democrat until like 1995. So, uh,
Well, I got plenty of opinions on Trump.
yeah,
Yeah,
but he's taken a lot of those early 1990s Democrat values and transitioned them into the Republican Party, right? I mean, he's effectively a 1992 Democrat almost on
yeah. No,
immigration, on
that's correct. I mean, he has flipped the script, especially the Republicans being the party of the elites for so long. Has now flipped to the Republicans being the party of the middle and lower class, right? And the Democrats being the coastal elites. That's been flipped by Trump without doubt. That's hats off to the guy for doing that, right? But now you have to actually legislate in that
oh
manner,
yeah, that's the
right?
big beautiful bill,
Yeah.
which is
Okay.
trying to
Well,
codify some of that. It's trying to
yeah,
codify. I know it's imperfect.
yeah. Of course, it's not. Well, there's no legislation that's perfect ever,
Right.
right? I have plenty of like poems about Trump and his crypto,
Oh,
coin
of
that is
course. Yeah.
like that. Like I've got. I don't like that sort of stuff, right?
Right.
At all.
Right.
Right? And this big beautiful bill, on the other hand, it's like, yeah, okay, it's a good roadmap. I'll give him that. It's a good roadmap, but there needs to be a lot more details and a lot other things addressed that just isn't in it at the moment.
Can I just tell you one of the most hilarious things that I saw this week was Kristi Noem pulling funding from Harvard University, or not pulling funding, sorry, not allowing Harvard to enroll foreign students. Okay. Now, I think the US needs foreign students. Very clearly, I think the US needs foreign students.
Of course,
But attacking Harvard, I think that is obviously the bastion of elitism in the US, right?
mm-hmm.
And so for the Trump administration to do this to Harvard, the optics on this thing are just catnip for people, right?
Oh
Everyone's
yeah,
just
it's
like, oh
great.
man,
It's
do it.
great.
Do it again, right? Do it once a week.
Take their accreditation away. Just
Right.
just make them like a DeVry or something. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. University of Phoenix or something, right? So,
Yeah.
so I think it's and what's coming into question now is what is the true value of Harvard's endowment? right? Bill Ackman's been out saying that. Like, they haven't marked this thing to market in like 20 years. So is it $60 billion or is it more like five? I mean, it's
Probably like
probably
a hundred
some,
and it's probably like 120. Listen, like
okay,
Harvard
great.
is the biggest hedge fund in the world. I mean, their
Yep,
incubator programs and whatnot are just massive,
right.
right? I've been there. I've seen those programs. It's massive.
Yeah, and I think it's prompting a discussion, and I'd be really interested to see if this emerges in the next few months, is what is the value of a private university endowment? And if they have endowments that are $100 billion, why do the feds need to support them? I think it's a valid question, right? Why
That
not
is a valid question.
more money to the state universities where your average kind of middle class and working class person goes and pull it from these elite universities that are private schools that have huge endowments? Let them compete with their own money. If they want to be able to raise this cash, what are they going to use the money for?
Yeah,
Aren't that many professors to retire?
that's the financial aspect of it. The social aspect of it, the political aspect of it is Harvard's just rampant anti-Semitism and
Yep.
political maneuvers by their students that just absolutely grotesque, right?
Yeah.
It is. I mean, Harvard can say free speech, this and that, whatever, but when you have groups of kids, ostracizing other groups of kids because what they think is they're doing is right is just it's not right at
Well,
all.
but Harvard is like the poster child for like trust fund kid socialism, right? It's like we have $100 billion endowment, but we also want government support just because we're Harvard. It's like, wait a minute, that does that really work out? I don't get that. Because like my small company can't get our employer retention tax credits, but Harvard gets, hundred tens of billions of dollars of support every year. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Again, what the Trump administration is doing is correct. How they're handling Harvard, and they should, to be honest with you, they should probably go 10 times harder on them. You know.
I'm here for it.
Oh, I'd love it.
I'm here for it. So, okay, now speaking of things that don't work, let's talk about Germany. Okay. So, so,
That's for
um,
damn right. That's for damn sure.
so let's talk about German politics. They have a new, what is it, chancellor or prime minister, whatever they call it,
Mertz, yeah.
Merz, right? So, I know that Merz talks about being more muscular and supporting Ukraine more and having a resurgence in Germany, but he's kind of, just in terms of background, he's kind of old news, right? He's kind of a recycled German politician.
Yeah, I mean, I liked Mertz long ago to replace Merkel back when he was more of a right wing conservative. To be honest with you, I thought that I knew he was going to be the leader at some point in time. It's a little bit disappointing to see that he catered to, again, the leftists to form a government.
Of
Instead
course
of,
he did. He's in Europe.
yeah, it's a little bit disappointing. And now, he's trying to talk tough, which on one hand is correct, right? The Germans do need to get their act together. They need to boost their military. He's talking about bringing back conscription service into Germany, which would be politically a nuclear bomb for them. I mean, they can't use broomsticks. They actually have to use guns this time, to train, whatnot. But I talk to Germans, I talk to Europeans a lot. I mean, even Valina and whatnot, many, many times about this for years, right? I mean, Germany can't just sit there and have a conscription service and then boost their military and do all this spending and blah, 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 because it's just not politically and financially feasible for them, right? They could have easily talked to countries like Albania or, Bosnia or whoever and had private militaries, supplement what they were doing for overseas operations rather than trying to do this whole conscription service thing, which is just going to end in a complete disaster and most likely a loss for Merz's coalition in the next election.
So tell me about that because I'm a little bit shocked to hear that Germany is going to restart conscription. So when did this news come out?
I think it just came out this morning, to be quite honest with you. It just came out this morning. He was talking about conscription, and I was drinking coffee, and I kind of like spurted it out laughing. I'm like, sure, I'm sure that'll pass.
Okay.
but like again, Merz is he's saying the right things, but like the execution of it is just going to be really difficult for them politically. It's just not feasible in my opinion.
Has he said anything about Germany getting their defense spending up to 5% of GDP?
That's just not good. That is so not going to happen. It's impossible to happen. For them to do 5% of GDP spending for defense would mean like half of their social programs get cut. That is politically not a chance, not a snowball chance in hell that's going to happen.
But isn't that kind of the point of Trump pushing so hard is he's trying to get them off of their social programs so that they become more competitive as economies?
I don't think Trump is really thinking that deep into it, right? He's talking about the
Okay, when I
2%.
say Trump, I mean the guys in DC who are in power. I
Yeah,
don't mean
again,
Trump.
I don't think Trump administration is thinking that deeply about it. Right? They're still talking. They're still talking to some of my colleagues about how to get Greenland. You know what I mean? It's silly talk within that administration, right? But
The
like, I don't think
52nd state.
yeah, I mean, I can't believe people took that seriously, but here we are, right? I don't think they think that far. They don't think second, third, and fourth tier on these type of issues. They just want to say like, we spend so much money, we want to see Europeans come up to 2% like they agreed to. Oh, okay, but do you realize that if they do that, their social programs collapse, their economies might collapse, and we're going to be the ones bailing them out because that's just the way it works,
They
right?
do
So
realize that because if they're going to be dependent on the US anyway, you might as well make that dependent more kind of front of stage, right?
I totally understand that, right? And I'm a big proponent of like, getting your dogs in line, right?
Yes.
Sometimes you gotta be strict with them, and you gotta, set them back and show them where the line is, and that's your place, right? I totally get that. I've been on top of the Europeans forever about these things, right? I just think that Europe has gone down a really disgusting path of these socialist policies, both economically and politically, and it's a lost generation for them, right? I don't want to see Europe having to be entirely dependent on U.S. dollars and U.S. military and U.S. Market, for them to sell their goods. You know what I mean? It's not good for
Yeah.
it's not good for Europe as it is.
Yeah, I think when people listen to you and me speak, that they believe that you and I want the whole world to use US dollars. And I don't think anything could be further from the truth. I don't think the Fed or the Treasury wants the world as dependent on US dollars as they are, because every move they make it has ripple effects all across the world, right? We're okay with some ripple effects, but I don't think we want as many. I'm not talking about debt. I'm talking about dollar transactions, right? I don't think
Mm-hmm.
we want Fed policy to ripple across everywhere. And so I think what you're talking about in getting a more self-determined Europe that really understands consequences is probably something that they want, that our guys in DC want.
I mean, sure. I mean, some of the more
Not
established.
going to happen, but
No, but going back, like the Europeans, in my perfect world, it would be the United States as a superpower, and Europe as what is China is today, as the secondary biggest market, biggest player on the global stage.
that was the design in the 90s, right? The United
Yeah,
States
that
of Europe.
that would be a perfect world,
Yeah.
right? Um, it's not the case, right? It's probably not going to be the case for the next 200 years, but there's no reason that no reason that the Europeans shouldn't like make corrective moves now by boosting their militaries, not to defend against Russia, because that's just a silly argument that Russia's going to roll in with tanks and nuclear bombs and take over Europe. It's a silly thing to talk
Yeah.
about, right?
Yeah.
I think that the Europeans, specifically France and Germany, Italy and Spain, need to lead in a military to establish their footprint back into Africa, back into parts of the Middle East and Asia, and use that as trade leverage for their industries, like the U.S. did, right? That's what I think they should be focusing on, right? But they don't do
Mm.
that because they have this like this guilt about what happened in the colonial Africa and whatnot.
Well, they
100.
killed a lot of people.
I understand that, right? I mean, the Belgian monarch,
Yeah.
King of Belgium. I mean,
King
that guy.
Leopold. You got to
Oh,
read King Leopold
oh my
Ghost, I
God.
think written in the mid 90s. Whew, how many people they killed in Belgium.
Yeah,
Really
listen,
bad.
I understand the atrocities that happened back then. Listen, there was no internet, there was no iPhones, things didn't
Right.
travel around the world, so things were being done over there that were absolutely atrocious, and nobody really knew up until maybe like a decade later, right?
Well, you can't hold today's European guilty of what their forefathers did.
Of
That
course, I don't hold anybody guilty. Nobody today,
intergenerational guilt is not it's not valid.
yeah, nobody today should
It's
be.
like today's Koreans holding today's Japanese accountable for what happened 70, 80 years ago. I'm sorry, you just can't do it. They're different generation, different people, different values.
I know, but man, do they hate each other
Yeah, exactly.
to this day. I mean, I got great stories, but yeah, I mean, but logically, you can't really hold anybody accountable for what their great grandfather did in Rhodesia. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just, it's kind of silly, right?
I'll tell a quick story about that. So I was in Seoul once, a long time ago, and I was with my Japanese counterpart. His name is Hiro. And our host in Seoul, he didn't like the Japanese guy I was with, because the name of the general who governed Seoul pre-World War II, his first name was Hiro. And so it's like if somebody's last name today was Hitler and you didn't like them because their last name was Hitler, right? It's like,
Yeah.
it was just a weird thing for me. I mean, I understood it, but it just seemed really crazy because he wasn't even related to the guy. But so anyway, I mean, that's how deep some of this stuff runs. So
Oh, let me tell you even better story real quick.
great. Tell me a better story.
I was in Tokyo for a meeting with like a couple of Japanese businessmen and whatnot, and they're prim, proper,
Oh yeah, I love Tokyo.
yeah, super professional. And like in the middle of the dinner, he's like starts sniffing around. I'm like, what is this guy doing? He goes, "There's a Korean in here." I'm like, what?
My gosh.
He goes, they all smell like garlic. I'm like, what are you
Oh
talking
my
about, man?
God.
And literally, the
Wow.
guy walks by, he's like, see, that guy's Korean. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah,
Wow.
it not this is just doesn't just apply to the Asian continent, but the European continent, America, everywhere, right? There's
Yeah.
animosity towards different people, different
Yeah.
cultures that are just generations deep, and it's not changing anytime soon.
Yeah.
But
Okay, one last thing on kind of on Europe, but kind of on the US. So yesterday, Friday, Trump signed these nuclear deals, nuclear power generation deals, which I think are good. We need power, diversity of feedstocks and, power generation and stuff. But we all saw in the wake of Fukushima that Germany and Italy and, everyone cut their nuclear, except for the French, everyone cut their nuclear power generation. Do you think that Trump signing these bills to push US nuclear competitiveness and power generation will force the Europeans to look at it and go, yeah, maybe we're kind of dumb for closing our nuclear plants?
yeah, I mean, it's stupid. I mean, what the Europeans did is just the most ignorant thing I've ever seen in my life. As
Taiwan did the same thing, really stupid. Japan did, I mean, they all did it. It was really dumb.
Yeah, I mean, the rate of growth of demand for electricity is so high, right? That there's no way that you can sit there and take windmills and solar panels to make up that difference. I mean, I think I saw some projection like in like 50 years, if you were to keep up with the rate of growth for demand, that you'd have to cover the entire country of Russia in solar panels. The entire country.
That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, might as well. What are they doing with it, anyways? But that's how crazy, that's how crazy that is, right? Like that's the
Yeah.
mentality is like, oh yeah, we're gonna use renewable energies. I'm like, well, the power fluctuations on the grid are destructive. They can't keep up with demand. Look what happened to Spain, where the entire country went on outages,
Yeah.
right? Like
Crazy.
that, all those things. If you're a policymaker, it's like it's all cute and fun when you get the left wing voters to put you in power, but what happens to your country in like 10, 15 years when it's been deindustrialized, like Germany? Look at Germany. The companies had to buy generators to offset the fluctuations in power so that the machinery didn't get blown up.
And then they just moved it to China.
Yeah, they moved it to China
That's the
or
ultimate problem
US.
is when you have, utility volatility and uncertainty, you just move somewhere else that has more stable utilities. And so I think what the US is doing with nuclear is really trying to set the basis for more manufacturing and more stable manufacturing through electricity. And I think there are a number of things being put in place. So, yes, rah nuclear and all those nuclear investors are really happy about it. But I really think that it's taking a creaking, aging power generation infrastructure, trying
Mhm.
to update it with nuclear and have more updated grids, not just the power generation, but grids through additional nuclear capability.
Hmm. Well, it's a good policy. It's a policy that much of the world should be following, to be
Yep.
quite honest.
Okay, man. So we're heading into summer, and what are you looking at in terms of just, over the next month? Things are slowing down, of course, but what are your expectations to happen over the next month? Like, will we see a Russia-Ukraine deal? Will we see, are there other deals that we're going to see coming down the pipe?
I gave Russia Ukraine 6 to 9 months a couple months ago, right? So I do think that there'll be some advanced talks, maybe a possible ceasefire for a month or two. I don't know what exactly Putin has for leverage anymore, right? So I do think something will happen substantially for the Ukraine conflict over the summer.
Oh, good.
I do. I think so. It's coming close, right? I mean, they're they were in Turkey, and I think the meetings kind of fell through for whatever glitches happened. But I think they're starting to talk behind the scenes, have some sort of face-saving end, or at least temporary ceasefire.
Okay. And then, like we've mentioned on here several times, we've said that U.S.-China relations would be pretty difficult until midsummer. So it would align with that timeline that we would see some sort of breakthrough in U.S.-China trade midsummer. Of course, it's not going to be 100% solved, but we'll see some progress midsummer, partly because that aligns with the holiday shipping season and other things.
Yeah,
So,
I do
go ahead.
think that the U.S. economy is probably going to bottom out in the summer, right? I think there's going to be a couple hiccups, whether they're manufactured or not. That'll be in another video. But I do think that's going to bottom out at that point, and they're going to probably try to launch the U.S. economy going into the winter, for the midterms in the spring next
Okay.
year.
So we have less geopolitical uncertainty on things like Russia, Ukraine. And potentially an Iran agreement, which I'm not holding my breath for, but and we have a more stable Syria and so on, right? So, we have more geopolitical stability. Hopefully, we have more trade stability with some sort of China agreement.
I do think, though, starting next month, and I tweeted this thing, and I think I wrote it up, but I do think that the world economy is going into a significant decline, on par with what we saw in COVID, right? Manufacturing, specifically manufacturing. So I think that'll probably push a lot of central banks and policymakers to do something in the fall. So that's why I'm saying that
Most,
the,
a lot of
the
them are already cutting, right? Except Japan and the US.
yeah, well, those are the only two that matter at the moment with
Right.
real bond
So
markets.
very cutting. So you're saying Fed cut in September?
I think so. I think September, October. I think in the fall we get one cut.
I'm
I,
always pushing for a Fed cut. You know
I
that.
know you are. I know you are. But it's just they got to just make sure that it doesn't like relaunch inflation going into midterm. That's the concern, right?
Yeah.
But I think that they do at least. I think they do one this year and maybe one again before midterms next year.
Okay,
That,
so less volatile, more dovish environment in the second half of 25. It sounds
yep.
like what we're talking about.
Yep.
Okay, that's great. I mean, I love it for the US. Everywhere else, I'm not really sure. I'd have to think about it. So great. Hey, thanks for this, Albert.
Yeah.
So for everyone watching, please subscribe. For you, that's free. For us, that helps us to monetize. So please subscribe to this. Please give us your comments, any questions. If you think we're full of it, if you want to add to what we're saying, we would really appreciate that. And of course, like this because it helps it get into the search engine stuff on YouTube, and that helps us out as well. So thank you very much, Albert. Thanks for your Saturday morning. I really appreciate it, and we'll get this out later today. Thanks,
All
guys.
right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Thanks.